2 wins over top 10 opponents in 48 hours on grass, from a player who 3 weeks earlier had never lifted a grass court title. Alex Eala left the court in Berlin on the 19th of June, having beaten the world number 2 and the world number 8 in the same weekend. And somewhere inside the WTA seating office, a printer began running pages it had never run before. But the number that matters this morning isn't the score from any single match. It's the figure next to her name on the printed Wimbledon draw that opens play today. 29. A seed the first ever awarded to a Filipina at a Grand Slam, in any era, across any of the 4 majors that have run without interruption for over 100 years. And the strangest part is that the seeding itself is the smallest piece of this story. The real story is the tape underneath it, for matches in 5 days that built that number. An opponent she'd already lost to once, then went back and solved. And a first-round opponent waiting on the other side of the net who's beaten her before. This is the quarter of the draw nobody in the locker room wants to land in. 3 weeks before Berlin, Alex Eala lost to Elena Rybakina at the Italian Open in straight sets. That detail matters because when Eala beat Rybakina 7-5, 6-4 in the Berlin round of 16, it wasn't a fluke result. It was a rematch. It was 4 weeks of tape study and tactical adjustment paying off on the clock. And the match before that one, the Berlin opener against Donna Vekić, was arguably the bigger statement, though the wider tennis press barely touched it, since the Rybakina headline swallowed the news cycle whole. Vekić had walked into Berlin as the newly crowned Queen's Club champion, carrying the cleanest grass court form on tour that week. Eala beat her in straight sets in the round of 32. By the time the seeding email landed days later confirming the number 29, the math had effectively already written itself. Wimbledon's main draw opens today, the 29th of June. Eala's last competitive match was 9 days ago. That's the recency window everything in this story sits inside. The structural counterweight at the top of this draw is Elina Sabalenka, world number 1, top seed, 2 majors to her name, and the most weaponized serve in the women's field. She's the favorite for legitimate reasons. But the version of her walking onto the lawn today isn't the one that tore through hard courts untouched 2 years ago. Her French Open ended in a quarterfinal loss to Diana Schneider, and in her own words she described that exit as falling into a very deep, dark hole mentally. The Guardian ran a long-form interview with her 2 days ago on the 27th, where she spoke about media pressure and how she sees herself. The sport's reigning power is walking onto the grass slightly off balance. And here's the part worth saying once. There is no public comment from Sabalenka about Eala in the verified Wimbledon pre-tournament coverage. The only on-record remarks she's made about her were positive ones, in passing during an ABS-CBN documentary last year. There is no feud here. This is bracket geometry, nothing more. The argument for treating Eala as the most dangerous low seed in this draw doesn't come from a quote, it comes from the tape. Start with the artifact itself, a single 96-hour stretch on grass in Berlin, between the 16th and the 20th of June. For matches, 3 wins, 2 of them against top 10 opposition on back-to-back days. Match 1, the one that keeps getting erased whenever the story gets retold, was Donna Vekić in the round of 32 on the 16th. Vekić had won Queen's Club roughly a week earlier and was, by most reckonings, the player carrying the hottest form into Berlin. Eala beat her 7-5, 6-4. The seeding recalculation didn't start with the Rybakina match, it started here. Eala didn't back into the Rybakina line of the draw. She earned it by removing, in the round before, the player who otherwise would have been its natural beneficiary. 2 days later came Rybakina, world number 2, 2022 Wimbledon champion, the same player who had beaten Eala in 3 sets at the Italian Open in May. Berlin was the rematch on a 4-week turnaround, and this time it went 7-5, 6-4 to Eala. It takes a specific kind of player to beat Rybakina, someone who can absorb pace and redirect it without flinching, who reads the second serve early enough that the first serve wins the point. 3 weeks earlier, that player hadn't shown up in Eala's game yet. By Berlin, she had the gap between a one-off result and a ceiling that has genuinely moved. Eala's team solved, in 4 weeks, a puzzle most of the tour has never solved against Rybakina at all. Take a breath before the next part. This is where the story lands. Everything so far has been the tape. What follows is what it produced administratively, historically, and in the room she's about to walk into this morning at the All England Club. The story stops being about wins and losses here. It becomes about what the rankings have to do when results stop matching the numbers they were built on. Elina Svitolina, world number 8, was the quarterfinal the day after Rybakina's 6-3, 6-4 to Eala. No three-set drama, no tiebreak luck. A clean, straight sets win against a player whose entire game is built to neutralize aggressive hitters, absorbing pace, stretching out rallies, breaking rhythm with depth and angle. Svitolina has built a career on forcing the other player to hit one more ball. Eala didn't let this match become that kind of match. This was the result that moved the seeding list. This was the match that started the printer. And then came the number 29, the receipt for everything Berlin had just produced. The first Filipina ever seeded at a Grand Slam. Not the first to qualify. Not the first to win a round. The first to walk into a major with a number printed beside her name. There's no precedent to measure it against, only the line itself, on the draw sheet released this weekend, in a record book that had nothing in that column until today. "It's nothing," she said in her on-court interview in Berlin, "compared to what my parents have sacrificed to bring me here." That's her own line, in her own words, and it's the only quote this story needs. But the seeding doesn't protect her in round one. Eala's first-round opponent at Wimbledon is Renata Zarazua of Mexico, and Zarazua has beaten her before, in 3 sets on a hard court in North Carolina, earlier in her development, but recently enough to matter. The seed number doesn't get her out of round one. Her tennis does. What nobody saw coming in Berlin cuts both ways. The danger Eala poses to the rest of the draw is real, and so is the danger waiting for her on day one. ESPN's tennis desk published a feature in early June, after the Birmingham title, framing that win as proof her game was still expanding, not a one-off result, but a wider return zone, a more reliable second serve under pressure, and a drop shot now used as a tactical weapon rather than a panic button. Just Women's Sports, covering the seeding milestone, framed the number 29 as a historical marker and drew a parallel to Emma Raducanu's seeding as a similar storyline on the British side. The story isn't that Eala got hot. It's that her game has gotten bigger, and the results are finally catching up to what practice courts have apparently been showing for months. Zoom out to what this means for the bracket. Wimbledon, more than any other major, has historically rewarded players arriving with fresh grass court form over reputation built on hard courts. Marketa Vondrousova won the 2023 title as an unseeded entrant. Barbara Krejcikova won in 2024 from a low seed. It isn't magic, it's the surface. Grass rewards whoever is solving grass right now, not whoever's ranking was built months earlier elsewhere. Eala fits that profile more cleanly than almost anyone outside the top 20. 2 top 10 grass wins in 48 hours, a grass title 3 weeks ago in Birmingham, and a seed low enough to land her in the same half of the draw as players ranked 10 or 15 spots above her who haven't played a competitive grass set since last season. The other dimension of this story is playing out across the Philippines. ABS-CBN, GMA, Rappler, and The Inquirer have all flagged the seeding as a national sports milestone, and Filipino communities online have circulated the Rybakina win as the biggest single result in Filipino tennis history, a loud chorus underneath the story, waiting a long time for something to be loud about. There's one thing Berlin didn't give her, and this story owes it the same honesty. The semi-final against Linda Noskova went 6-2, 6-4 the fourth match in 5 days, after 3 straight against top-tier opposition, and there simply wasn't anything left in her legs. There's no on-record quote from Eala about that loss. The read is the obvious one. A body that has just produced 2 top 10 wins on consecutive days doesn't have a third one in it the next afternoon. The recovery window before her Wimbledon opener is 9 days adequate, not generous. The question isn't whether she can play at this level. It's whether she can do it 4 days running in the second week, if the draw asks her to. Which brings us, finally, to the room. Not the court. Not the press conference. The players' locker room at the All England Club, where the printed draw goes up this morning, and Alex Eala's name sits on it with a 29 beside it. That's the achievement that exists whether or not she wins a single match this fortnight. The Vekić win bought the ticket. The Rybakina rematch bought it. The Svitolina win stamped it. The seeding doesn't get her out of round one. Her tennis will have to do that, but it gets her into the room, with the former champions, the current number one, and players whose names have lived on these draw sheets for a decade. No Filipina has ever stood in that room at this tournament, or at any of the 4 majors. That's the line in the record book that turned over this weekend, and it isn't turning back. Wimbledon begins today. Alex Eala's first-round draw is sitting on a board in southwest London with her name on it, in a room that has never had anyone like her in it before. If you want to follow what happens next, stay with this channel through the fortnight. The round-by-round breakdowns are coming, starting the moment she steps on court.